The vast expanse of space stretched infinitely in all directions as the starship Obsidian Wing sailed quietly through the cosmos. This wasn't just any vessel. It was one of the premier learning ships of the Galactic Convergence, designed to take students on educational missions across the galaxy. On board, students from different worlds gathered for one of their most anticipated field trips. Journey to the infamous planet Earth. Inside one of the observation rooms, a group of alien students assembled, their excitement and nervous energy palpable. The room's walls were transparent, offering an unparalleled view of the universe outside, nebulae swirling in distant galaxies, star clusters burning in radiant hues. But what held their attention was the blue-green planet that loomed larger and larger as they descended, Earth. The lead instructor, Professor Zernik, a tall, crystalline being from the planet Koros, stood at the front of the room. His voice, a series of melodic hums and chimes, echoed through the translator devices the students wore. Attention, everyone. Today we begin our study of one of the most enigmatic species in the galaxy, the humans. A ripple of intrigue passed through the students. They had heard countless stories about humans. The Galactic Convergence considered them to be one of the most unpredictable and volatile species, particularly their young. But how dangerous could children really be? Professor Zernik continued, his crystalline form shimmering under the soft lights. Humans possess qualities that make them both feared and respected across the galaxy. Their children, in particular, are known for their chaotic behavior and boundless imagination. Today, you will witness this firsthand. Among the students, Parak, a small, insectoid being from the dry planet of Yurta, raised one of his many limbs. Professor, how are their children any different from other species young? The pause followed, and the professor's voice grew more serious. Human children are unique. They think and act without the limitations of logic or fear, which can make them incredibly creative or incredibly dangerous. But today, we observe. Remember the rules. You are to remain unseen at all times, and under no circumstances are you to interact with the humans. The ship slowed its descent, cloaked by advanced technology that kept it invisible to Earth's primitive detection systems. It touched down in a secluded area near a school in a place known as Glenridge Primary. The alien students, cloaked by personal invisibility devices, filed out of the ship and followed Professor Zernik toward the schoolyard. It was recess, and human children were scattered across the playground, their laughter and shouts filling the air. Some ran in chaotic patterns, others played organized games, while a few sat quietly, engrossed in their own worlds of imagination. Tyra, a floating jellyfish-like entity from the gas giant Krith, hovered near the edge of the playground. They seemed so harmless, she whispered telepathically to her classmates, just like any young of our species. But as they observed more closely, they began to notice the differences. Human children weren't just active, they were explosive. Their energy seemed boundless, their actions unpredictable. One moment, they were running across the playground. The next, they were forming elaborate games, their rules shifting at a moment's notice. One child, a girl with bright eyes and wild hair, caught the alien's attention. She was directing a group of others in a game that seemed to involve capturing invisible enemies and defending their fort made of playground equipment. The complexity of the game, the creativity involved, and the speed at which they changed tactics was unlike anything the alien students had ever seen. Parak, watching with keen interest, turned to the professor. "Is this what you meant, Professor? They're relentless." Professor Zernik nodded. Indeed, humans, even at this young age, demonstrate an extraordinary capacity for rapid adaptation and improvisation. They don't rely on physical strength or special abilities, but rather on their ingenuity and determination. This is what makes them feared by many. As the group continued to observe, one of the children, a boy named Tom, climbed atop a jungle gym, calling out to his friends below. Let's make this harder. First one to the top without getting tagged wins. What followed was an eruption of frantic energy, children racing up and down the jungle gym with reckless abandon. They were fearless, pushing the limits of their small bodies with wild abandon. It wasn't long before one boy slipped, plummeting toward the ground. Tyra gasped, "He's going to fall." But at the last second, another child reached out and caught him, their laughter ringing out as though the near accident was nothing but part of the fun. "They don't even fear danger," Perak said, his eyes wide. Professor Zernick's tone was grave. "This is only the beginning. Human children have the potential to turn chaos into their advantage. They thrive in uncertainty." As the recess period came to a close, the children were ushered back into the building by their teacher. The alien students, still cloaked, followed behind, their minds swirling with questions and unease. They had come to observe human children, but what they found was far more complex than they had anticipated. The professor glanced at his students. "We'll continue observing, but remember this: what you're seeing today is only a fraction of the chaos and creativity that resides within human children. You've only just begun to understand why they are feared across the galaxy." The alien students filed silently into the classroom, their cloaking devices still active. The room was brightly lit, with rows of small desks arranged in neat lines. The human children took their seats, buzzing with the energy they carried from the playground. Their teacher, Miss Dawson, stood at the front, her warm but firm voice trying to corral the students' attention. "All right, class, settle down," Miss Dawson said, her hands gently waving to quiet the room. "Today, we're going to learn about Earth's ecosystems." As she spoke, the classroom's interactive display flickered to life, showing images of Earth's diverse environments: dense rainforests, arid deserts, deep oceans, and icy tundras. The alien students watched intently from their hidden positions, still adjusting to the human children's unpredictable energy. Tyra, hovering near the ceiling, was fascinated. "They seem so calm now," she observed telepathically to her classmates. "Almost controlled." Perak, who was crouched near the door, didn't look convinced. "Don't be fooled. There's an underlying tension in the room. It's like a storm waiting to break." Miss Dawson began the lesson, explaining the delicate balance of Earth's ecosystems. At first, the children listened attentively, their eyes fixed on the vibrant images displayed on the wall. But soon, as the minutes ticked by, their attention began to wane. A few children started whispering to one another. Some fidgeted in their seats and others doodled in their notebooks. The controlled calm that Tyra had noticed began to unravel. At the back of the room, Tom, the same boy who had orchestrated the chaotic jungle gym game, was restless. His fingers drummed on his desk, and his eyes flicked between the teacher and the small device in his pocket. A tablet that held games far more exciting than the lesson on ecosystems. Unable to resist, Tom pulled out his tablet and tapped it quietly under his desk. The screen blinked to life, showing the start of a game. The other children nearby noticed, their whispers growing louder. Slowly, a ripple of mischief spread across the room. "I told you," Perak muttered, his many eyes fixed on Tom. "They can't sit still for long. Something's going to happen." Before long, the game Tom was playing caught the attention of a girl sitting next to him. She nudged him and pointed to the screen. Tom smirked and swiped across the tablet, sending a bright flash of color across the screen. The girl giggled. At that moment, the alien students felt a shift in the room's energy. It was subtle at first. A shared glance between the children, a whispered joke passed around. But then, like a spark catching dry leaves, chaos began to erupt. The tablet screen suddenly flickered and glowed unnaturally bright. A wave of electricity surged through the room, causing the classroom lights to blink rapidly. The interactive display showing Earth's ecosystems glitched, the serene images of forests and oceans warping into strange, distorted shapes. The children gasped in surprise, and a ripple of laughter spread through the room. "What's happening?" Tara asked in alarm, her tendrils glowing faintly with confusion. The other alien students stared in shock as the children seemed to feed off the sudden disruption. Instead of fear or panic, they responded with excitement. Some stood on their desks, laughing and pointing at the flickering images. Others clapped their hands in rhythm, turning the malfunction into an impromptu game. It was as if the classroom had transformed into a playground of pure chaos. Professor Zernick's voice resonated through their telepathic connection. "This is what I warned you about. Human children have a way of turning disorder into something else entirely. They thrive in situations like this." Miss Dawson, the teacher, tried to regain control, her voice rising over the commotion. "Everyone, sit down. Quiet, please." But her words were lost in the cacophony. The children's energy only seemed to grow with each passing second. At the center of it all was Tom, who now had half the class crowding around his desk, their attention fixated on the glowing tablet. His mischievous grin stretched wider as he swiped across the screen again, causing another surge of electrical interference that made the lights flicker even more violently. "We need to leave," Parak urged, his limbs twitching nervously. "This is getting out of control." But Professor Zernick remained calm. "Not yet. We need to observe. This is what we came for." Suddenly, the lights went out entirely, plunging the room into darkness. For a moment, there was silence, but then, like a wave crashing against the shore, the children erupted into laughter and cheers. Some began to chant Tom's name, while others banged on their desks in rhythm, turning the dark classroom into a chaotic symphony of noise and energy. "They're enjoying this," Vrel, a tall, insectoid student with shimmering wings, whispered in disbelief. "How can they find this fun?" Tyra, still floating near the ceiling, watched in awe. "It's like they're creating their own reality. They're not scared, they're in control." Indeed, the children seemed to revel in the chaos they had inadvertently created. Without the guidance of their teacher or the structure of the classroom, they had taken control of the situation in a way that no other species would. The room was their playground now, and they were the masters of their own disorder. Just as the alien students thought things couldn't get more bizarre, a loud bang echoed through the room as one of the children overturned a desk. The noise sent a fresh wave of excitement through the group. Another child joined in, pushing their desk over as well. It wasn't long before the entire room was filled with the sound of clattering furniture, the children pushing boundaries they didn't even know existed. Professor Zernick, still calm but visibly tense, addressed his students. "We've seen enough. This is exactly why humans, especially their children, are so feared. Their ability to thrive in chaos is unmatched. We'll continue our observations tomorrow, but for now, we retreat." With that, the alien students quietly exited the classroom, their cloaking devices still active. As they made their way back to the ship, the sounds of laughter and clattering desks faded behind them, but the memory of what they had witnessed would linger. As the ship prepared to depart, Parak glanced back at the school. "We've only scratched the surface, haven't we?" Professor Zernick nodded. "Indeed. This is just the beginning. Tomorrow, we will delve even deeper into the chaos that makes human children so feared and so fascinating." The next morning, the alien students gathered in the ship's observation deck, their minds still reeling from the previous day's encounter. They had seen firsthand the wild, chaotic energy of human children, and it had left them with more questions than answers. What fueled this unpredictability? Was it unique to Earth, or did all human children possess such unrestrained potential? "We're going back today," Professor Zernick announced, his voice calm but firm. "We need to dive deeper into their creativity. Yesterday, we saw their chaotic energy. Today, we'll focus on what they create." The alien students exchanged uneasy glances. After what they had witnessed, many were unsure if they wanted to see more. But curiosity, the driving force behind their entire mission, pushed them forward. The ship hummed to life, and within moments, they were descending back toward Earth, heading for the same school where chaos had reigned. This time, they didn't land in the playground, but instead found themselves in a different part of the school, a room filled with colorful materials, odd shapes, and strange tools. It was the art room, and the children were already there, eagerly awaiting the start of the lesson. "They're going to create things today," Tara observed, her eyes scanning the room. "Let's hope it's less chaotic than yesterday," Parak muttered, though he didn't seem convinced. The alien students took their places around the edges of the room, still hidden by their cloaking devices. The human children, oblivious to their presence, were fidgeting excitedly as the teacher, Miss Parker, introduced the day's activity. "Today, class," Miss Parker began, her voice bright and encouraging, "we're going to let our imaginations run wild. I want you to think about something that doesn't exist yet. It can be anything: a creature, a machine, a new world. And then, I want you to make it. Use whatever materials you want. There are no wrong answers here. Just let your imagination take over." The children cheered, their excitement palpable. Immediately, they sprang into action, grabbing paints, clay, paper, and an assortment of odd items from bins around the room. Within minutes, the art room had transformed into a hive of creative activity. "This is different," Vrel noted, watching as the children began to work. "They're so focused." Professor Zernick nodded thoughtfully. "Yes, but pay close attention. Creativity and chaos are two sides of the same coin for humans. What looks like focus can quickly become something else." As the alien students observed, the human children's creations began to take shape. Boy in the corner was constructing a strange mechanical creature out of wire and gears, while a girl nearby was painting a fantastical landscape filled with floating islands and colorful creatures. The room buzzed with energy, but this time it felt different, controlled, directed, and yet still teeming with the same unpredictable potential the aliens had witnessed the day before. Tom, the boy who had caused the chaos in the classroom the previous day, was at it again, but this time he had a pile of clay in front of him. His fingers moved quickly, molding the clay into something that, at first glance, looked like a simple animal, but as he worked, the creature began to take on features that defied logic: wings made of fire, legs that shifted shape, and a face that seemed to change expressions depending on the angle you looked at it. Tyra was mesmerized. "He's making something impossible." Prak shook his head, his scales rippling with unease. "It's not just impossible, it's dangerous. Look at the others. They're all creating things that can't exist. What happens when they try to make them real?" As if in response to his words, something strange began to happen. The air in the room seemed to shimmer, and the alien students felt a sudden surge of energy. It was the same feeling they had experienced the day before in the classroom. The raw, unfiltered potential of the human children, but this time it was more focused, more intense. Tom's clay creature, now fully formed, sat on the table in front of him, but it didn't just sit, it moved. The wings flickered with fiery light, and the creature's eyes blinked, glowing faintly as if it had come to life. Tyra gasped. "It's alive." "No, it's not," Professor Zernick corrected, though there was a note of uncertainty in his voice. "It's their imagination at work. They're projecting their creativity so powerfully that it feels real." But the creature wasn't the only thing that seemed to come to life. All around the room, the children's creations were moving, shifting, and interacting with each other in ways that defied the laws of physics. The floating islands in the painting seemed to drift off the canvas. The mechanical creature made of wire and gears buzzed with electric energy, and a paper dragon one child had folded flapped its wings as if preparing to take flight. The alien students were in awe, but also deeply unnerved. This was more than they had anticipated. Human children weren't just chaotic. They had the power to bring their imaginations to life, to reshape reality itself through sheer will. What are we witnessing? Vrel asked, his wings twitching with nervous energy. The beginning of something we don't understand, Professor Zernick replied. Their creativity is boundless and dangerous. The children, oblivious to the aliens' growing concern, continued their work, laughing and chatting as their creations moved around the room. For them, this was all part of the fun, a game of imagination, a way to escape the mundane world around them. But for the alien students, it was something far more profound. Suddenly, one of the children, a girl with curly red hair, stood up, holding a small orb made of colorful clay. She tossed it into the air, and to the shock of the alien students, it floated. The orb hovered in the middle of the room, spinning slowly as if caught in its own gravity. The other children stared at it, eyes wide with amazement. "That's not supposed to happen," Parak said, his voice barely a whisper. Professor Zernick's mandibles clicked together in agitation. "No, it's not. But that's the thing about humans. They do what's not supposed to happen." The floating orb began to glow, casting soft, shifting colors across the room. The children were delighted, laughing and clapping as the orb pulsed with light. But the alien students were more alarmed than ever. This was no longer just a display of creativity. It was a demonstration of the raw, untapped power that lay within human children. "We need to leave," Tara said, her voice trembling. "This is getting out of hand." Professor Zernick hesitated, but then nodded. "Yes, we've seen enough for today. But this is far from over." As the alien students quietly exited the room, still cloaked from view, they couldn't shake the feeling that they had witnessed something extraordinary and terrifying. The human children had shown them a glimpse of their true potential, a power that went beyond chaos and imagination, a power that could reshape the very fabric of reality. And as the alien students made their way back to their ship, they couldn't help but wonder, what would happen if this power ever grew beyond the walls of the classroom? Back aboard their ship, the alien students sat in stunned silence, each trying to process what they had just witnessed. The human children had not only demonstrated creativity beyond anything the aliens had imagined, but they had also somehow bent the rules of reality itself. The implications were staggering. "We've barely scratched the surface of what these children are capable of," Professor Zernick said finally, breaking the silence. His voice was calm, but there was a clear undertone of unease. "We must understand how they do this. If we don't, we risk facing an unpredictable force." Tyra, still shaken by the floating orb and the living clay creature, looked around at her fellow students. "But how can we understand something so wild? We've studied countless species, but none have displayed abilities like this." Vrel chimed in, his usual confidence replaced with uncertainty. "It's as if they're not bound by the same rules we are. Their imaginations, it's like a raw energy, capable of shaping the physical world." Parak, who had been unusually quiet, finally spoke up. "We need to know if this is unique to the children, or if all humans can do this. What if their adults have mastered this ability?" The thought sent a shiver through the group. If human adults could wield the same power with control and precision, they could pose an unimaginable threat, or an equally unimaginable opportunity for collaboration. Professor Zernick nodded gravely. "That's a question we need to answer. But first, we need to see more. Tomorrow, we will observe them again, but this time, in their most natural environment. At play. That is when their true nature will reveal itself." The alien students exchanged wary glances. Play. They had already seen what these children could do in structured environments. What chaos could their playtime unleash? The next day, the alien students found themselves once again hidden in the human school. But this time, they were outside. The playground stretched before them, a space filled with swings, climbing structures, and a large open field where several children were already running around, laughing and shouting in the crisp air. As the human children played, the alien students observed from a distance. Unlike the art room, Where the children's creativity had been directed toward specific goals, the playground was a realm of pure freedom. The children moved in groups, sometimes shouting out elaborate stories of imaginary worlds, sometimes chasing each other with a reckless abandon that left the alien students both fascinated and concerned. "They're doing nothing and everything at the same time," Vrel remarked, watching a group of children sprint across the field, pretending to be starship pilots in a battle. Parak tilted his head. "It's unstructured. They're not following any rules, yet it seems like they're all in sync." "It's play," Tara said quietly. "Pure play. They're not bound by objectives or limitations here. This is their true power. Imagination in its rawest form." Suddenly, Tom, the same boy who had brought his clay creature to life, shouted, "Dragon attack!" He stretched out his arms as if holding an invisible sword, and with a dramatic flourish, he summoned an enormous dragon to battle. Instantly, the other children responded, some pretending to be knights, others taking on the role of the dragon's allies. As the alien students watched, something astonishing began to happen. The air shimmered once again, just as it had in the art room. The children's imaginary dragon began to materialize, its fiery wings flickering into view for brief moments before vanishing again. The knights' swords, though invisible to the naked eye, seemed to leave faint trails of light as they slashed through the air. "This isn't just imagination anymore," Vrel whispered. "They're pulling their creations into reality again." Tyra's eyes widened in alarm. "It's not just Tom this time. They're all doing it. They're amplifying each other's imagination." Indeed, the entire group of children was caught up in the game, their shared vision of the battle becoming more real with every passing moment. The alien students could feel the energy pulsing through the air, the same raw, untamed force they had felt before, but now it was magnified by the collective will of the children. "We need to intervene," Parak urged, his voice trembling. "If they lose control of this, who knows what could happen?" But Professor Zernick held up a hand. "No, we must observe. This is crucial to understanding their potential. They're not just imagining, they're creating. But we need to know if they can control it." As the battle raged on, the children's imaginations seemed to push the boundaries of reality further and further. The dragon, though still flickering in and out of existence, roared with an echo that shook the ground. The knights and their allies fought valiantly, their invisible weapons now glowing faintly with energy. And then, just as the tension reached its peak, one of the children, a girl with dark hair tied in pigtails, called out, "Time freeze." Instantly, everything stopped. The dragon vanished, the glowing swords flickered out, and the children stood frozen in place, as if caught in a spell. For a moment, the alien students were confused. Had the girl somehow halted the game? Had she broken the flow of imagination? Then, to their surprise, the other children slowly began to move again, but this time, they were calm. The battle was over, and now the group stood in a circle, discussing the outcome of their game as if it had all been part of a plan. "They're resetting," Tara murmured in amazement. "They're controlling it. They're playing with reality," Professor Zernick added, his voice filled with awe. "They create, they destroy, they reset, all within the bounds of their imagination." The alien students were stunned. These children, who had appeared so wild and chaotic just a day ago, were showing an incredible level of control. Their play wasn't just random, it was a form of creation, a way to explore and manipulate the world around them, even if only in short bursts. But the implications were clear. If human children could do this at such a young age, what could they do as adults? What would happen when they learned to harness this power fully? As the children's game wound down, and they began to scatter across the playground, laughing and chatting as if nothing extraordinary had just happened, the alien students knew one thing for certain. They were dealing with a species unlike any other they had encountered. "Tomorrow," Professor Zernick said quietly as they made their way back to the ship, We will observe the adults. We need to know if this power grows with age, or if it fades. And if it does grow, we must decide what to do with that knowledge. The next day, the alien students gathered once more in the observation room of their ship, hovering invisibly above Earth. Today was different. Instead of watching the children, they would observe the adults, the fully grown humans who, if the children's behavior was any indication, might wield unimaginable power. The ship cloaked itself near the bustling heart of a city, where humans of all ages went about their daily routines. The alien students were cautious, their curiosity tempered by the realization that human adults could be far more dangerous if they had mastered the same abilities they had seen in the children. "This time, we're watching from a distance," Professor Zernick said, his voice tense. "We cannot afford to make mistakes." The students spread out, each observing different parts of the city. Tara stationed herself near a business district, watching as adults entered tall buildings, briefcases in hand. Vrel chose to watch a marketplace, observing the flow of people as they traded and bartered for goods. Parak focused on a nearby park, where adults walked, sat, and chatted, some alone, others in groups. Hours passed, and nothing unusual happened. The adults seemed completely normal. They worked, socialized, and went about their lives with the same level of order that the alien students were used to seeing in most species. There were no bursts of creativity or chaotic manifestations like they had witnessed with the children. It was as if the wild energy of human imagination had been completely tamed. "Maybe the adults lose their power as they grow older," Vrel said over the communication channel, disappointment creeping into his voice. "There's nothing extraordinary here." "I don't understand," Tara replied. "The children were capable of such incredible feats. How can that power just vanish?" But Parak, who had been observing the park, was silent. He hadn't moved from his position all day, his eyes glued to a group of adults engaged in a peculiar activity. Finally, he spoke. I think I found something." The other students turned their attention to Parak's location. In the park, a group of adults sat in a circle, each holding small, rectangular devices. They weren't talking to each other, but instead, they seemed to be focused entirely on the glowing screens of their devices. "What are they doing?" Tara asked, perplexed. Parak zoomed in on the group. "I'm not sure, but there's something about their behavior that feels familiar." As the alien students watched, the adults began to smile, laugh, and sometimes frown in response to whatever was happening on their devices. They weren't interacting with the world around them at all. Their minds seemed completely absorbed in whatever was happening within the glowing screens. "They're not using their imagination the way the children do," Professor Zernick observed, his tone thoughtful. "They've externalized it.